Hello and welcome back to the Future of Figure Skating podcast. I'm Anna Keller, and my guest today is Jamal Othman, the Managing Director for the Ice Academy of Montreal and Markey International Arts. Jamal was the 2009 Swiss national champion, and in his post-competitive career, he has combined his interest in international business with his love of skating. In this episode, we talked about marketing and branding, the Olympic cycle, and how ice dance can fit in between sports, art, and entertainment. This is also the first video episode for the Future of Figure Skating, so make sure to check out and subscribe to our YouTube channel to watch this conversation and future episodes there. Hope you enjoy. Wonderful. So thank you, Jamal, so much for coming on the podcast. It's a pleasure to get to talk to you and to learn a little bit more about your work and the work of the Ice Academy of Montreal. First off, I would love to know more about the founding of IAM and how that vision came to be and some of your role in that work.
Of course. Well, thank you very much for having me, Anna. It's a pleasure and an honor. Yes, so the Ice Academy of Montreal, first, I think, to be clear, to explain all that, I have to say that IAM was really a rebrand of a school that already existed. We rebranded the school that came into place when Romain Hagenauer has joined forces with Marie-France and Patrice here in Montreal. In 2014, they started to build a school. Some skaters obviously were already here that were training with Marie-France and Patrice. Roman brought some skaters from France, and I think then we all know what happened in 2015. Then Gabi and Guillaume won their first world championship title. And all that I was really just experiencing as a spectator, basically, because at the time I was already together with Roman, of course. I lived here as well, but I wasn't working in the company yet. So this school, was continuing, working, achieving great results. And it was really then in 2019 when I was working in the travel industry at the moment, had a great boss who had become a little bit of my mentor and a good friend of mine. We were talking a lot about what Roman does and about our passion of figure skating, which I obviously never lost, even though I quit. We were discussing, talking about these things, and probably over a lot of evenings with maybe a glass of wine or two, we were thinking, well, there is more to that than just the medals that they win. And we basically, were discussing and talking about what potential this group of coaches, which it was at the time, could potentially have. We then really came up with a vision and the strategy for a company, presented that to the head coaches, and then we went from there. That's really how the Ice Academy of Montreal was born. In the very beginning, in 2019, it was just a rebrand, and then that was when the real work started. My position in all that, the work that I do is it's a bit difficult to explain because there is so much to do. Basically, the idea was to take a group of figure skating coaches and to turn their business into a company. That, of course, comes with a lot of other work that has to be done off the ice, meaning administration, HR, marketing, PR, all these things that we have been trying and are building since 2019. Those are really the things that I oversee and that I do. I think that's
Yeah. Absolutely. And so just to give a little bit more about your background, so you were a competitive skater and you retired after 2010. And so I'm also always curious about how people who have that background then figure out what they want to do in the next part of their life. So how did that transition for you go to find out that you enjoyed doing that side of the work?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. Well, difficult one. Maybe a long one. You just stop me when when you have too much information. Well, I think like every professional athlete, and especially in sports like figure skating and maybe gymnastics, where sometimes you reach the peak of your career quite early, meaning when you're quite young. It wasn't easy. I was 23 at the time when I quit. I had a little bit of physical challenges, you know, the usual ankle, back, those things. And at the same time, I just realized that I would probably not place any higher at Europeans and Worlds and Olympics than I already had. So I decided to quit. I did that really in the summer of 29. I decided that that was going to be my last season, even though we had European Championships in my hometown, in my rink where I had started to skate and practiced all my life in Bern in 2011. But I just felt I couldn't do that anymore, which, yeah, not everyone agreed, but in the end of the day, it was my decision to take, and I'm happy about it today. But I was probably, like everyone, quite scared of that moment, or at least I had a lot of respect of the moment when I would step off the ice, knowing that this was my last time to compete or train. Which it really was when I stepped off the ice after 2010 World Championships, after the free program. That was it. I had decided and tried to prepare for that moment, which you can do as much as you want. It's never the way you expect it to be. But I did put things in place. I got a job offer in Malaysia. I went to Southeast Asia to be the national ice skating coach of Malaysia in summer 2010. I knew I wanted to leave Switzerland. It was too cold. Well, I live in Montreal now, but that's a
I know, I'm laughing at that because Montreal is its own extremes of temperature.
Well, that's a whole different story. We'll get to that maybe in a bit. But anyway, yeah, I moved to Malaysia. Didn't really. It wasn't my dream to become a coach, but as it is with a lot of skaters as well, you know, coaching is really the first option and probably the best option that you have when you were a competitive skater. And you know, quit your career without knowing how you're gonna basically support yourself after that. So I decided to, you know, travel the world, go coaching. I knew I wanted to go to university, so I signed up for a degree in international business because I really didn't know what I was gonna do. I always knew that I wanted to work in sports and in figure skating specifically, but at the time I was really figuring out in which capacity, because I just quit my competitive career. I didn't want to be a coach, and 23, that's all I knew. So I did that. I also knew that I wanted to gain some corporate experience, because I thought, you know, I wanted to somehow combine business and my passion for figure skating. It then so happened through life, I was in Malaysia. I was going to university. I was also modeling at the time, and that's where I actually met my then future boss. He was the chief commercial officer at Malaysia Airlines, for whom I did a campaign for their new business class seat. Whatever, we met. He was Canadian. I told him I was gonna move to Canada, and we got along super well. I then started to work for him in his small travel industry consultancy business. I worked at the headquarters of the Radisson Hotel Group, then of a small airline here in Canada, before I really realized this is all great, and it was great for me to get this experience, but it's not where where my heart and my passion lies. So I kind of yeah, didn't actually actively try to find a way back to my roots, back to figure skating. But as I explained earlier, that was really the time when I was talking to my good friend. His name is Charles. And Roman, and then we came up with this idea of the Ice Academy of Montreal, and then it was very clear what I was going to do.
Yeah, no, that's great. And that's so interesting. I think that you were able to take all of those experiences and different pieces of what you were learning along the way and bring them into this work now. When you were thinking about IAM and how that was going to be, what were some of the goals? Why brand it as the academy in that way? I think it really is distinct in a lot of ways from how many other skating schools are set up and the profile that it has in the skating world. And so, walk me a little bit through that vision and why you wanted to go in that direction.
Of course. This whole thing really started because I knew, I've lived through or with Roman through his coaching career as well, and of course I got to know Marie-France and Patrice very well as well, and it was very clear to me that they had something special going on. It was really the whole rebranding and this idea of creating this company came from a lot of discussions and talks that we had with them, and I listened to what was important to them when they were coaching. And this is really aside of all the medals that they're winning. I know and for me also it's very impressive what they do on the ice. But that is not the part that I'm involved with at all, and I honestly don't want to be. I love it to watch these skaters. I love to watch the practice because it's a really great place. But I'm speaking about the part really that is off the ice, because I realized that Marie-France, Patrice, and Roman, for them it was very, very important to not only create athletes that are successful on the ice, but really that skaters, athletes, adults that will be and are successful in their lives. I know this is something that a lot of people talk about now, this, the holistic development of the human being also in sports, but that is really what it was. That was really the idea, and that was the ideology that they had. And I saw myself how it worked, because I have never been in a school before, and as a skater, I was in Europe, I trained in the States a lot, I trained in Russia. I have never seen anything like it, and I've never seen a response of the athletes to their coaches in a way that I see it here in Montreal. And that really was what made me thinking, well, usually when you have these big coaches' names, they're here for a decade, 2 or even 3 or 4. They create great skaters, and then they retire and then they vanish. The idea for us was really to create an environment and an ecosystem that allows the skaters to see beyond their competitive career, because we know, we have been through this. We know that, of course, when you're young, when you skate, there's one thing that you want, which is being successful on the ice, win as many medals as you can, and then probably do shows, earn money, but you don't really think about what's happening after. But your life after your competitive career, even when you quit when you're 30 or 35, your life after that is pretty long. And we wanted to create an environment where skaters could already see, were enabled to see beyond their competitive career and maybe think about, not actively think about what they want to do, but at least create an environment and a place where they could see that there was a space for them. Now, I'm not saying, of course, that it's not like we create work for all our skaters. That's not the idea. But by creating a company like this, knowing that it is important that the coaches that work for us have the same attitude, the same vision that we have, well, obviously, who are the best candidates are the skaters that went through the school, that went through the academy, and that have been training under those founding coaches. That was, I would say, like the main idea in the beginning, that we wanted to create or give the athletes the tools to not only win medals, but be successful in their lives and create opportunities for them once they quit, which doesn't only have to be as coaches. So far, we did hire our former skaters as coaches, but if we are successful in implementing the vision that we had in the beginning, then there will be much more opportunities for our skaters as well.
Yes, and it's so interesting being able to see that happen, like you said, very obviously with the I am in Toronto and seeing the skaters going straight into being high-level coaches in that way. But beyond that piece, it's also interesting to see what opportunities in shows and in other parts of skating, but also outside of skating, that you've been able to help them have. And so I know the work that you do goes beyond that of a traditional agent, but I would love if you could talk a little bit about how you look for opportunities for skaters and how that side of your work fits into the school.
So yes, I know you're talking about Markey International Arts. That is really a separate company that we have launched at the same time that we did with the Ice Academy of Montreal. Because in the initial vision, the initial dream was really to create something that is holistic, really holistic, meaning that we can basically take care of almost all the needs that our athletes have. At the time, we realized that there are the traditional agencies that we all know in figure skating and in sports. Those are some of them very big agencies, full service agencies that also produce their own shows, but they're very big machineries where I'd say that probably the personal relationship with the talent themselves is maybe not the focal point. For us, what we wanted to do is really create this agency, a part of the Ice Academy of Montreal, a part of the coaching part of the company that would allow us to do certain things that probably a traditional skating school or a training center couldn't or wouldn't do, or would find themselves in situations that are not that easy to navigate. So we created this agency at the same time, Markey International Arts, which is basically really my former boss who is involved there, and myself. Of course, we do share some services with the Ice Academy of Montreal because it just makes sense. And the idea was really to be able to support skaters who may not fit with any of the traditional agencies for whatever reason, be it they are not at that level yet that they would get a contract with a big agency, or because they are just not happy with a big agency. Whatever the reason may be, we wanted to give them the opportunity to be supported in that aspect as well. Also, of course, because we believed, and I guess we knew that we have the capacity and the know-how and the business acumen to do so. In the end of the day, today, I guess there are two parts to Markey International Arts Day. One is really the representing of the talent themselves, which we do mostly for figure skating shows, because that is still the biggest chunk of work they get. Of course, we try to get them opportunities outside. It's something that is not very easy, as you can imagine. For many reasons, we can talk about that too, because it's figure skating. Figure skating is a special sport. Also because we are based here in Montreal, we work with a lot of international skaters, and it is not always easy to, from that perspective, to represent athletes when you're not in their country. For obvious reasons, because in figure skating, the skaters represent their country. They don't represent the club. They don't represent the Ice Academy of Montreal. They represent their own country. So from a sponsor's perspective, mostly those opportunities would arise in their own country. The other part that is really one that we probably didn't think so much about in the beginning, but that we realized is really an opportunity, is the market of figure skating shows or other figure skating gigs in our region, meaning in Montreal. Canada is a country where figure skating is a people's sport. Everyone skates. It's cold. We have ice. It does make sense. And Montreal is a city where we have, during the winter, we have a lot of outdoor skating rinks, a lot of activities that are going on. And of course, there is a demand for skaters, for shows. And in a lot of cases, they would actually contact the Ice Academy of Montreal, but as a coaching entity, as an academy, we don't have the resources to do that. So that's why Markey International Arts then takes care of that, which of course creates a lot of great synergies. Logistical issues are a lot easier, just because when if I get a request for, I don't know, 3 ice dance couples to do a show in a rink in Montreal, usually that's very complicated, because the skaters, they have their training, which is very individualized, personalized. Everyone skates at a different time, basically. And their lives, and then there has to be rehearsals for that show, and their show dates and everything. But the fact that I'm already inside, like I know when they train, I know their schedules, I know their annual planning, it is a lot easier for Markey International Arts to make things like this happen. And these are definitely opportunities for the skaters that they appreciate a lot too, and that can generate some additional income for them. And those are really the two things that I do in my capacity as the director of Markey International Arts.
That's so helpful to understand that, and also very interesting what you were saying about the challenges of working with so many international teams. And that's something that I had wondered, as, I mean, I can see obviously many advantages to how IAM has grown and has now so many teams from so many countries, but that must also add a level of complexity to figuring out what the right opportunities are for each of those teams and each of those skaters, and how to, to approach so many different skating nations and business environments and all of those things. How have you adjusted to that sort of complexity of having so many skaters that are a part of the school?
So again, there are two perspectives to that, right? There's the Ice Academy of Montreal, and then there's Markey International Arts. As an agent, I have taken quite a passive role in a way that we don't want to, we don't actively go out to contract skaters, because in the end of the day, that even though this is the core business of Marquee International Arts, Marquee International Arts is still a part of the Ice Academy of Montreal, meaning our core business is still coaching. What we want to do, coaching as the core product, we have an augmented product, so to say, that entails a lot more than just coaching. One of those things would be the possibility to be managed and represented by Marquee International Arts. But this is not something that we do actively, but more in a passive way, where if we feel that there is a couple that is either in need or is looking for support from that point of view, then of course we present that. I probably have to say to that as I mentioned already, the figure skating world is a very small one. Figure skating shows are limited, even though there are the small shows here in Montreal, there are the shows in the desert of Dubai. There is all this, but traditional big figure skating shows, there is not a million, right? So I representing athletes to negotiate their rates, to go through their contracts with the shows, that is something that we can do without a problem. When there is, when it comes to sponsorship deals and all that, that is where it becomes really tricky, because we are based here in Montreal, and our even though our network really is global, but you need a very close relationship, and also you really need to be in the market to be able to create those opportunities for athletes. So we mostly work with the skaters on the figure skating shows, and then work with their respective agencies in their country, if they have one, for sponsorships and those opportunities.
Yeah, I see. Thinking about ice dancers in particular, it seems like there is an increasing market in some ways for ice dancers to be part of shows in places like Japan, and seeing that there's some interest, but it also is a part of the sport that is maybe a little less prominent in the minds of the public in a lot of places. And when thinking about, and again, this is sort of a one half in terms of shows and another half in terms of other kinds of sponsorships, but it does seem like there are some particular challenges in finding opportunities for two people as opposed to for one person. And that's something, I was thinking about this during the last Olympics, that, for example, that Madison Chalk got her own spotlight in some ads during the Olympic cycle, but then seeing where there are opportunities for a team versus for individual skaters. And would you speak a little bit about that in terms of ice dance in particular, and the challenges that are involved?
Okay, yeah, that's a broad one too.
Yeah.
Let me start if we just look at figure skating, I was a single skater. I'm gonna very honestly out myself here as one of these classic figure skaters, single skaters, who did not care about ice dance nor pair skating while I was an athlete, because for me it was just, there is men's and ladies, and that was the most important, I admit. I think that is something that is very prominent in our sport. The big stars are the single skaters. We can debate about the reason. when it comes to shows in Japan, for instance, we know that the big stars in Japan are also single skaters because those are the most successful skaters in that country and in other Asian countries. Ice dance comes with those two, I think, disadvantages. One is it's not as popular as single skating because the stars are, the stars are today still those who do quads. It just is. It is what it is. What it is. Plus, there's always two. Meaning, if you if you invite an ice dance couple to a show, you pay double the expenses. You have to pay twice the flight. You have to pay 2 rooms, and also from a fee perspective, the fees of an ice dance couple is never double that of a single skater. Even the prize money of an ice dance couple isn't double that of a figure skater, of a single skater. Of course, obviously, also because they together kind of deliver the same product that a single skater does, right? They deliver one program or 2 programs, and they win one championship or one medal. It's the same medal, but it's 2 people. It's between the team sport and the single sport, but it's really an individual sport. But I think those are definitely the two disadvantages that come with ice dance. I have grown to really, really love this sport for several reasons. Obviously, because I'm involved now, but also because I really have discovered the beauty in ice dance, which now when I look at single programs, sometimes I feel like, oh my God, they're not doing anything but jumping and doing crossovers. Although I remember my time as a skater very well, yes, it was about the jumps, and other things were not that important. I think those are really the challenges that we have working in ice dance. Of course, something that what has come to our advantage now is that we almost have half of the world's best ice dancers here, which gives us a little bit of a monopoly when it comes to that. But that is really that again is basically something else. That's just talking about the market share in a market that is relatively small that we have. But one of our missions is definitely also to make the sport of ice dance, the discipline of ice dance, more attractive. I think a big chunk of that work is being done on the ice. And I'm really talking about the way the Ice Academy of Montreal works with the skaters, the way we create choreographies, really the quality of ice dance itself. That is something that has a very big high priority for us, even though sometimes it may look like we have grown to a size that is where people sometimes start to think, okay, all they want is grow and make money and just count the skaters and coaches they have in their academy. But that's really not it. I mean, top priority at IAM is still to create the best, the most magical ice dance that we can, and that's what we try to do. Hopefully successful, with the goal, of course, to make more people discover how beautiful ice dance is and how enjoyable it is being watched during a show.
Yeah, and the flip side of the strength of ice dance is that the skaters are all strong performers. They have a good sense of what it is to appeal to the crowd. They're all great at the artistic side of the sport, and so in terms of entertaining an audience or any of those things, they have a leg up in that way. So that if we can see that as a strength.
Yes, yeah, totally. And that is not only so. There is that, of course, that ice dancers, because they don't do the jumps and all those things that require such a high percentage of their time. Um, they have all this time to invest into the artistry, the expression, and telling the story. They have the advantage of being two. In the end, you have so much more than twice as many opportunities and possibilities to do things when you have four arms and four legs and two bodies that you can work with. There is all that, and there is a difference that I didn't realize before, is really that the average age of an ice dancer is higher than of a single skater when they are at the peak of their career and when they quit, which for us not only has it brings with it not only the fact that they are more mature, they are more expressive, they are more they're more suited to be ice dancers, but also they are in a different not in a different period, but their competitive career extends into a different period of their lives, which is why we can do a lot of the things that we are doing, and why we want to do that. Sometimes, we're also thinking about going into single skating, going into pair skating, but they are different sports. I think we can really say that ice dance is very different from the other disciplines, and the fact that the skaters are older in general makes a big difference from a career planning and and I mean competitive career, and also post career planning. It makes a big difference, and opens up a lot of other opportunities.
Yeah, and just that they, as clients, are people who are, you know, adults making some of their own decisions about their careers in a way that I think so many of the single skaters are, they're still teenagers, their parents may be the ones who are involved in that, or they just don't have the life experience to necessarily want to direct their own careers in as strong a way, I would think.
Exactly. I mean, that is something that is very important for us. We really, at the age of 18, we try to mostly communicate with the athletes, if not exclusively. We believe that that is really the time when, and of course, it's not at their 18th birthday. Not everyone is the same. It also depends on what subjects we're talking about. But we really try to make the athlete responsible for their own lives. That is something that is important for us, not only in the work on the ice, but also off the ice, when it comes to, what do they want in the future? How do they handle their season planning, to realize when they need a day off, or when they need to go on vacation, or to handle their bills, or to. We then also have other challenges here, of course, because we have a lot of foreigners. So there's the whole, it's the whole life basically that they need to take responsibility for, and be their own boss.
Yes. Yes. Well, and then that, like you said, that prepares them to their post-competitive careers as well, to be responsible and understanding of all of those pieces.
And that's exactly our goal. That is exactly what we are trying to achieve. Because again, as I said, yes, medals are great, and we wish everyone wins all the medals that they would like to. But first of all, the number of medals is very limited, so not everyone gets to win everything, but everyone gets to live a life after their competitive figure skating career, which is, as I said, which is in a lot of cases longer than their competitive figure skating careers. So it is very important for us to prepare them in any way we can for their future after skating.
Yes. And speaking of medals, how much do opportunities depend on, being able to say, oh, you're the European champion, or oh, you have, these medals next to your name. It seems like in some cases that's very determinative, but that there are some opportunities for skaters that are able to market themselves as particularly unique performers or have other sort of unique stories that they're able to tell. How do you approach it with a skater that maybe doesn't have a long list of medals next to their name?
Yes, of course. I mean, when it comes to certain shows and the public image in general, gold medals help a lot. A lot. So honestly speaking, already silver and bronze medals help less. And even though the fourth place could be just, very, very close to the third place, the fourth place is less helpful. Definitely. That's the way it is. I think it's a human tradition and a very long-standing one. It depends on what you were talking about. If you're talking about those, traditional figure skating shows, of course, they want all the champions, which is very normal. It's also what a fan, of course, can understand very easily. A gold medal is very easy to understand. They are the best. So it sells. So for shows, I would say there's that, of course, and then if you are if you're a unique, a special performer, of course, you get the opportunity during competitions, be it Grand Prix or also then the championships. You do get the opportunity to show yourself as a showman or a showwoman, even without medals. And that is something that is definitely being picked up. There are quite a few examples of skaters who have never won any big medals, who did go into shows very successfully. But yes, that would require some kind of uniqueness that not everyone has. When it comes to opportunities outside of skating, we do see a shift a little bit today from, there has been this traditional sponsorship model where you basically take a very well-known person or a very successful athlete, and that athlete becomes then the face of a brand, for instance. We do see a shift a little bit away from that, and obviously it does come with social media. As you know, on social media today, we have influencers, we have people that have millions of followers, and I'm not someone, I try not to spend too much time on social media. It's once in a while I realize there's someone with, 5 million followers, and it's just a regular person. It's someone who has never won anything. But from a brand perspective or from a company perspective, people like this, influencers, can be as effective as as an Olympic champion, or sometimes even more effective. So I would say there is definitely a shift away from you can only make anything out of your career if you won medals. You can definitely do that in a different way, but you also have a different set of competitors. You then are competing against those Instagrammers and TikTokers that are dedicating their lives to do that, and that's a whole different set of competitors that you're up against, and that is not everyone's cup of tea either. So I think what is the most important part, and again for us, and that's the I think the opportunity, but also the duty that we have, or that we gave ourselves at the Ice Academy of Montreal and also at Markey International Arts, is really that we don't want to just make everyone famous or make everyone make as much money as possible if that's maybe not what they want, or if the way to get there doesn't really match their personality or their dreams. So that doesn't, it's not an obligation. I think what we are trying to do is really to show those opportunities and show them what is possible and what is most suitable for them. Although that is a question that then they have to answer themselves.
Yes, no, that makes a lot of sense. And yeah, I had an interesting conversation early on with the podcast with May Bernice Mayte about how she had to learn how to do trying to become an influencer and trying to have that kind of following as a way to keep her career. Yeah.
Who was that?
May Bernice, the French single skater.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. As an example of someone who has a kind of unique story and personality and got a lot of followers on Instagram, but has not had that kind of competitive success. She really leaned into building that following and trying to make brand collaborations on it through that, and other ways to try to support her career. And it was an interesting conversation, precisely because it's a huge workload to do that, and the demands of keeping that up while training as well. So
yeah, exactly. I mean, Maya is a great example of someone who didn't win all these medals or yet, but who has seized the opportunity of having an impact on a different level, realizing the story that she has to tell, and making the best of it. She's a great example of that, definitely.
Yeah. So the Olympic year, I was going to say, is coming up. I know we're halfway through the cycle, but it always feels like it's coming up. And I was thinking about the opportunities that come in particular with that, both in terms of the sort of marketing through nationalism or, that kind of approach that we often see that with each country might pay more attention to the sport than they would in another year, and businesses in a particular country might, and there are lots more opportunities around that. I was also curious about the TV show that you did or that IAM did during the last Olympic cycle on the Olympic Channel, following many of the skaters. And I was curious if there's anything you could share about what that was like.
Yeah, so to your first point, Olympic cycles, obviously we're an Olympic sport. We work in Olympic cycles. The launch of the Ice Academy of Montreal wasn't a coincidence either. It was really after the 2018 Olympics, where Tessa and Scott won gold and Gabby and Guillaume won silver. That was really when we thought, okay, now we have to do something so we are ready for the next Olympics, because you really only have 2 years in between. I mean, it's 4 years, but there is one that is really the post-Olympic year, and then you have 2 years where you can really work, and then you already have the pre-Olympic year, and then it just goes very fast. So of course that's what we were thinking when we launched the Ice Academy of Montreal in 2019. It was really to kind of seize the opportunity and everything we could during the 2022 Olympics. We are now yes, as you say, basically halfway through the cycle, and are definitely already ramping up for the next. The one thing that, and I'm gonna be very honest, to me, this is a little bit like the first one, just because we had COVID. It kind of changed everything a bit, yeah. I mean, when I started, or when I started with the Ice Academy of Montreal, I had very, very different ideas of what I wanted to do for the 2022 Olympic Games and the whole time leading up to there. I would say probably 80% of my time during those 3 years was invested into COVID protocols, trying to figure out how we can train, where we can train, under which circumstances we can train, who can travel where, making sure that, and I mean, this was huge. We had 11 couples, meaning 22 athletes and 6 coaches that we sent to the Olympic Games, who were all training in the same complex every day. So we knew that if anything happened, and we all know what it was basically impossible to get to China at the time, even if you had COVID 2 months before. So if anyone got positive, we knew that almost, half of the ice dance event wouldn't be there. So the pressure was very, very high, and that was really, for 1 or 2 years, that was really all I did, basically. So I am very much looking forward to, or I was looking forward to this cycle, and we have been doing great work, and I'm very much looking forward to the next Olympics, and I definitely want to be able to exactly make basically seize every opportunity we can, not only for IAM, but also for our skaters, for the skaters that we represent at Markey International Arts, because it feels like the first really real opportunity. Of course, there are, during the Olympics, it's always a little bit of phase, because so from the perspective of the Ice Academy of Montreal and also Marquee International Arts, we work very closely with all the national figure skating associations, of course. And as you know, during Olympics, there is always this other entity, or those 2 other entities that kind of take over, which are the National Olympic Committees as well as the International Olympic Committee. That doesn't take over, but there's just always that part that you have to work with. And so that nationalism that you were referring to, that is kind of a little bit omnipresent in figure skating, because, as I said, skaters always represent their country, but it just is that much stronger during the Olympics. So there are skaters that have to spend more time in their home country, be it for any number of things. There is always, of course, more media that is in our rink during that time, and as you can imagine, we have skaters from, I didn't count lately, but probably from 13 different countries. A lot of them are national champions and are supposed to go to the Olympics. So we do have a lot of media in the rink during the Olympic season, and it helps. It is also a challenge for us from an operating standpoint, because we want to make sure, and again, our number 1 priority is training, meaning the skaters want to get their medals. They don't want to primarily give interviews, but it's part of the game, of course. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities that are going to come, and I as I said, for me, it's kind of the first time, if we don't count the pre-COVID time. So we are very much looking forward to that. I can't tell you too much about it now. It's it's a lot of ideas, a lot of exciting stuff, but I guess we'll see how it goes. Regarding On Edge, which was the series that the Olympic Channel did here in Montreal, that was really that was the Olympic Channel who contacted the Ice Academy of Montreal because they wanted to come in and do that series, which was a whole challenge by itself because for a number of reasons. First of all, it was still post or during COVID. Yeah, it was before the Olympics. That was a big challenge. Not only because I mean, you know, the whole film industry, and they already had very very strict policies and rules in place. But in the end of the day, for them, like for people who work in that industry, for you know the director and the cameraman and everyone, for them it's still what they work on is still their most important thing, right? It's their job, and we had to make it very clear that for us that's not it. Yeah, even though we are on the set, for us it's training and making sure that our skaters are prepared 200% for these games. For some of them and for all of them, it's one of the most important things in their lives, and we cannot jeopardize that with, you know, by shooting a documentary series, which it was a great opportunity for us, you know, to show, and for the skaters to showcase them, to tell their stories. But it was a challenge from that kind of perspective of COVID protocols and also setting the priorities right. We then, because again, I would say, especially during that time, no skating school, or it would have been difficult for a skating school to handle that project. So we kind of outsourced that, well, outsourced, saying, because Markey International Arts is not exactly outsourced, but still, it was, we put it into that bucket because we needed it handled by an outside entity. So what we basically did from Marquee International Arts perspective is we really handled all the logistics, meaning we were communicating with the team, with the Olympic Channel. We made sure, and that was the biggest part, of course, we made sure that while the team got what they needed, the skaters were the least impacted possible. That's basically that was our work, which was very challenging, especially also because they came to competitions, and then there's a sit-down interview there, and then of course they want to go home to everyone and all these things, which was, I mean, the show was great. I think it was really fantastic, but it needed quite close supervision, let's say, just because you have these very different people from very different you know, work settings with very different priorities that would clash during months just before Olympic Games. So yeah, I mean, that was a bit what I did. It was not easy, but I think we succeeded. So hopefully they do it again. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it was really interesting to be able to see more of the story of the skaters as individuals and the relationships between both sort of within the teams and among the teams, and hopefully for people outside of the sort of skating super fans that might read all the interviews and know more about these things, to be able to see more about that side of the athletes as people, and how things work at IAM. So I was glad to see that happen, and interested in other ways to try to, expand awareness of skating and of skaters beyond maybe a sort of an image of what the sport is and who the people are that often feels, at least in the United States, very stuck in the 1990s. And so being able to see more of those stories, I think, was great. We've been talking about what opportunities exist for skaters and for dance teams. Thinking about marketing the sport of figure skating as a whole and trying to grow an audience for it. That's a huge question, obviously, but I'm curious what your thoughts are about what some of the opportunities might be, what some of the challenges are. Obviously, it's a small world and we want it to be a bigger world or a bigger part of the sports and entertainment world. And yeah, what do you think some of the opportunities for that might be in the future?
Now, I don't want to sound negative, but I will still start with the challenges, I think, because I'm someone I love figure skating. For me, it's the most beautiful sport in the world, and especially to, I think, for one to do, but also to watch. And I'm just grateful that figure skating exists. That said, it is a special sport for I would say two reasons. One is it's and figure skating actually in German, now my mother tongue is German. In German, figure skating is Eiskunstlaufen. And Eiskunstlaufen has the word Kunst in it, which means art. So in the German word of figure skating, you have art. And it is an art. Now, I know this is a discussion or this is something that a billion people have said, but it's important to just underline again. It is not just a sport, meaning it's not just as the goal is not just to be as fast and as strong and as high as possible. It is an art, and which comes with the issue of the judging. Huge theme. We're not gonna get into that. I'm not someone like, I think there are a lot of people who are breaking their brains over the figure skating judging system. I'm sure it has room for improvement. I want to let that, I want to let those people do their work. But it will always be a problem, I think, because it's a sport that cannot be subjectively measured, full stop. That's it. End of the story. There are other sports like this, like, gymnastics, rhythmic gymnastics. That is definitely something that makes it less, not maybe less appealing, but it is more difficult for people to understand and to identify with. Because when you go and see, when you go to, like, for me, it's like, it's a performing art. For me, figure skating is a performing art that happens to also be Olympic, which is pretty unique. I mean, it just doesn't exist. When people buy tickets to go and see a dance show or a ballet recital, they know they're doing something cultural, and there is a very broad public for that. Figure skating it's a sport, so it comes with all this competitiveness where we want to win medals. So it comes with the negative things that have happened recently in sport, be it abuse, be it doping. All these things don't help the image of this still performing art, which is you know what I'm trying to say, right?
It's sort of caught in between those two worlds with things that make it hard to appeal to either of them in some ways.
Sometimes I feel like figure skating doesn't have the advantages of both, but it has a little bit the disadvantages of both, because the combination is just, you know, I mean, again, I don't want to be negative. Figure skating is my life, like probably everyone's who will ever listen to this, to me right now. But it is not easy. That is one thing. And the other thing is that figure skating has a very high entry barrier, which is twofold, I think, which is the ice itself. We don't have, you know, as many ice rinks as we do have soccer fields in the world, and also the cost of coaching, which is also very different from a lot of other sports. I mean, I know that tennis is probably the same, but it's a lot of one-on-one individual coaching, which is a bit like playing an instrument, you know? It's like
Yes.
you have, so that's, it's expensive. It's not like soccer or football or baseball where you, or handball or whatever, you become a member of a club, the fees are really minimal, and you can, of course, then there's also a lot more players, so in a way you could argue that competition is also higher, but the numbers and the money, the zeros in those other sports is something that for a figure skater is just unimaginable. And that is something that is going to be very, very difficult for us to overcome, because we're not going to change the climate. Well, climate change is again another topic, but it doesn't go in our favor as ice skaters. So for me, those are the two very intrinsic things of figure skating that I'm not going to change, and that we have to work with. And I don't think yes, there are disadvantages if you compare to other sports, and if you compare to whatever other business opportunities, or if you compare to the actual arts, or but it is our sport, and I think we have to accept that, and we have to make the best of it, which I'm trying to do.
Yes. Yes, and it's interesting what you were just saying. I yesterday was talking to a number of the different skaters and professional skaters and leaders of companies that are part of the contemporary skating movement, and that are much more associated with that world of performing arts than the sports world, and was talking to the director of the Ice Lab Leipzig, who was telling me all about the ways that they use artificial ice and bringing it into dance studios and into theaters, and trying to bring skating outside of the rink environment. And that was really fascinating. I think there are a lot of challenges that come with that, but trying to find ways to get around some of those kind of innate limitations of the need to have an ice rink and the need to have that those environments and the time involved in all of those pieces. And so it was interesting to hear a little bit about trying to push the boundaries of that part of it as an art form. But I very much understand what you were saying about all of those challenges. And for people who are used to thinking about watching sports as a competitive thing, that is usually much easier to understand why someone is going to win or lose than it is to understand skating. The barriers to entry as a fan to understand it as a sport are also high comparatively.
Yes, very, and I'm just gonna say, it's even a lot more difficult in ice dance. I mean, I still barely understand, and I was a figure skater myself, and I have been in ice dance for quite some time now. But ice dance is even more difficult, I think, because ice dance is probably on that spectrum between sport and arts. Ice dance is probably even closer to the arts. So that makes it very difficult. But I love, I love all the things and the things you just spoke about trying to kind of bring that barrier down and try to think about innovative ways to to take figure skating outside of the rink. I think technologically we're not there yet. I mean, I've skated on synthetic ice before. It's not the same. It's at least it's not the same to skate. It may be already similar for an audience to look at, but it's just still not the same. You don't get the same speed. You don't have the same.
The glide is very different, yeah.
I mean, I think and now I'm just starting to think about what we would want to do in the future. Of course, I think it's those things are also the projects that we as the Ice Academy of Montreal would want to get into in the future. Again, we're a startup company. We cannot do everything at the same time, but those are the things that we that make our hearts jump as well, because that's what's going to make the sport grow and what's going to help create new audiences and capture new markets, and that is fantastic.
Yes, that is, and I am an optimist by nature, though I try to be a realistic one. So I'm always looking for the things, the experiments that people are trying, and what opportunities might exist in the future, and all of those pieces. But I also am someone that tends to think the reason I like skating is because of the art, and the competition just happens to come with that. And so for me, I resist learning the rules of ice dance and just try to enjoy watching it, which then means that sometimes I get very upset about the judging because I have no idea. And so it's funny that as somebody who watches so much skating and is very familiar with the rules as the singles and pairs side, sometimes I enjoy watching ice dance more because I'm not stopping to analyze it. I'm just appreciating it, and it's a different experience as a fan.
No, I totally understand, and I think you're not the only one. There's probably a lot of people, a lot of fans who have the same experience. It is. I don't know if it's a really bad thing. I mean, we're saying that it is very much an art. The competition part just comes along. But as an athlete, I don't think I would have started to skate if figure skating wasn't an Olympic sport. As an athlete, I still think the Olympic Games is the thing. That's also a big part of our sport. We are one of the. I mean, we're one of the oldest, I think the oldest sport in the history of Winter Olympics. It's a very big part of the identity of figure skating is the competition and the fact that it is Olympic, and it's still a very big motivator for young skaters, the competition. And of course, it's a different kind of competitor. It's not the one that just puts the head down and runs as fast as he can. No, it's a competition in the arts, and I think that's it's beautiful, but it comes with its set of challenges, and that is really something that there is not a lot of data that exists on the figure skating fan on the same level as it exists for other fans. I think that is something that in the future could be or should be explored a little bit more, because we do have special fans, I would say, but we don't know them very well in a certain way, I believe. And that is also something that with the perspective of growing figure skating, making it more popular, is something that has to be explored more as well.
That's a very interesting point, and I had read a little bit, not about skating, but in the context of team sports, that there is more attention being given to how fans are now much more fans of individual athletes and may follow that athlete from team to team throughout their career, as opposed to only being, in a traditional way, sort of, a fan of your home team and just following that team, and that there's a growth of that kind of fan. And so it does seem like as that becomes true, that individual sports potentially have an advantage or have an opportunity in that kind of a market. But it's an interesting question, and would love to know more about that as any kind of research could happen.
Yes, definitely. I mean, what you're saying is one possibility. I do believe we already have those. I mean, our fans are the ones that follow, one individual or one couple. And honestly speaking, we as the Ice Academy of Montreal, we are trying to capture a little bit also the fans that are team fans. That's why we also position the Ice Academy of Montreal as a team, because we would like to make our sport more attractive to people, to fans who are team sports fans. We know that this comes with, or the reasons why they are fans are it's a different set of reasons to a certain extent, and there are certain attributes that we just don't have in our sport, which is really a team. Except, of course, there is synchronized skating, which is there, but doesn't have the popularity today. And we are trying to kind of unite some of the skaters together in a team. But as you said, I think we don't know enough about the figure skating fan, really, and we don't know enough about how we could capture new fans as well.
Yeah, one thing that I would love to see would be an extension of the team event, but not just in the context of national teams in the Olympics, but I think it would be so interesting to have a team event with mixed nationalities, but you would be able to follow a team in that kind of a way, and it might have to be something that would exist in a professional competition format rather than in an ISU kind of context. But I look back at some of the things that were done in made-for-TV competitions in the 90s and that kind of thing, and I know that for myself as a fan, and I think many of the people that I talk to, that kind of approach would be really fun. People would enjoy it a lot, but would it also appeal to an audience outside of the existing fans? I'm always very surprised at how so many of the people that I talk to, even skaters in the US, people who follow the sport, really just follow the Americans. And since that's not my experience, I always am surprised when I'm reminded of still how much people's idea of being a fan is about that level of nationalism. So there's opportunities and challenges to each of those approaches.
Yes, definitely. But I understand that, because also as an athlete, when you represent your country at international competitions and at world championships and at Olympics, you do, in a certain way, you do feel that patriotism, and I mean, you're always, representing Switzerland, blah, 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 representing USA. And that's what you hear every single time you go and present yourself and perform in front of the world. So it does have that effect on us, and it has the same, on the skaters, and it has that same effect, I think, on fans. And it is understandable in a way, because in the end of the day, that's how society is constructed today. That's how we live. We are divided into countries. Again, something that's not going to change anytime soon. But I totally understand your point of, it doesn't have to be that way when it comes to fandom. And
Yeah.
and that's definitely something that, exploring other formats of competition or even show is always I think is great. In the end of the day, you always need, you need the right people with the right resources and the right kind of influence to make something like this happen. And it happens at different times in different sports. There are other team sports that have 3x3 now, that is very successful. This is also something that took years and years to develop and actually happen. We'll see how far it goes. Figure skating is a very traditional sport with a lot of traditional people in charge, and it would be interesting to know to which extent the fans love that or don't love that, or you know but I think there is a lot of very interesting and fun stuff happening in our sport that will shape the sport in the future, and I'm very glad to be around to see that happen.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Jamal. This has been a great conversation, and I really appreciate you sharing so much about your work. Is there anything that I didn't ask about or any closing thoughts that you would want to share?
Well, no, I thank you very much. It's been great. I did. I hope that your listeners will will understand what I was trying to say.
Thanks again to Jamal for sharing his thoughts and experiences with us. As always, the episode transcript and more resources are linked in the show notes. You can follow Jamal's work at Ice Academy of Montreal and at Markey INTL Arts on Instagram. You can reach me with comments or suggestions for topics and people I should talk to by email at fsfuturepodcast@gmail.com or on Instagram and Twitter at FutureFSPodcast. We are now also on YouTube, so make sure you're subscribed there too for video episodes. Special thanks go to Ivan Danilov for editing and technical assistance for this episode. If you appreciate the podcast, you can also support my work with a tip jar at futureoffigureskating.pinecast.co. Remember to subscribe and review The Future of Figure Skating on whatever platform you use and share it with your friends.